know that you're irrational? That we're all irrational? You see, we evolved that way. Human beings evolved to be irrational. It's a survival strategy. But there's a problem with our evolved irrational survival strategy. It gets us to make mistakes, it leads to paranoia, and it leads to conspiracy theories. Let me explain. There are 3 elements to this. We'll begin with the first element, type 1 and type 2 errors. These are either positive errors or negative errors. Imagine that you are in the savannah in Africa. You're facing this huge expanse of grassland, but behind you there is some bush. And you hear something rustling in the bush. Well, it might be a saber-toothed cat. If you decide it is, and actually there is no saber-toothed cat, you're likely to run away into the grassland, and there's a reasonable chance that you'll survive. That's a type 1 error. It keeps us safe. A type 2 error would be when you decide that there is no saber-toothed cat, and there is. If you make that sort of error, you die. So, evolution and natural selection being what they are, we evolved into a species that makes type 1 errors. We assume that there's a threat when there isn't, because we're more likely to survive that way. That means that we're more likely to breed, we're more likely to pass on our genes, and the gene for running away, for assuming there's a threat when there isn't, became so strong, so prevalent in our gene pool that we're evolved from a long line of cowards. We assume threat, type 1 error, when there is none. The next piece of evolved thinking I want to talk to you about is the fact that we are all agency detectors. And the reasoning behind this is very, very similar. It is in fact a type 1 error in itself. We assume a plan. We assume intention for just about everything. Because if something goes wrong, and it was planned, then that tells us that we need to be on our guard for the next thing that will go wrong, and the next, because someone is out to get us. And the third is pattern seeking. We join the dots, we put 2 and 2 together, and sometimes we put 2 and 2 together in ways that really they don't fit. So, for example, because some radical Muslims are members of the Taliban and they're brown, we assume that brown people are all radical Muslims. That's a pattern. It's just not an accurate pattern. But when you combine these 3 types of evolved irrational thinking, type 1 errors, agency detection, and pattern seeking, you are absolutely on the road to a conspiracy theory, to paranoia, and to general misunderstanding. But don't despair. The fact that we've evolved to be irrational doesn't mean that we can't find a way around it. And the easiest way to deal with these irrational mental shortcuts, these heuristics as they're known, is never to allow yourself to simply accept the first explanation for a thing that you come up with. Always look for at least 3 candidate explanations. And then, when you've got 3 possible reasons why something might have happened, decide which of those is the most plausible. In that way, you can beat those heuristics. You can still keep yourself safe because you're using logic and rationality to decide on what is and is not a threat. So you're still not going to be falling foul of the type 2 errors, but neither are you falling foul of the type 1 error. You're not assuming agency where there is none, and you're not finding patterns where no patterns exist.